and there's water to your right on the table. Please do help yourselves if you'd like to and need. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, and that means that committee members are present in Bridgewater House, and the meeting is also available online via Teams. Please note that the meeting is being recorded. Can I remind everyone in the room to turn their mobile phones off, please, or to silent? And those joining us online, can you please turn off your cameras and microphones so that the meeting isn't disturbed? I'll now introduce you to those taking part in the committee today. To my left are officers from our legal and democratic teams, and to my right are the planning officers who will present the applications. On the wings of the table are the councillors who will debate and decide the applications. The format will be as per the published agenda, and a copy of the officer reports can be found on the council website. Each application will be taken in turn. Officers will outline each application, followed by public speaking time. Only members of the public who've registered to speak can make representation. Councillors around the table will then debate and decide on each application. During the debate, there will be a proposer and a seconder for a resolution. Members will vote on the proposal, and only members who have been present throughout the whole debate of that application will be able to vote. The voting options are for, against, abstain or defer. Votes will be counted and the result announced. Okay, so that now takes us to the main agenda, and apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence. Yeah, it's not her. Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Brian Bolt and Councillor Brian Smedley.
Thank you.
No.
No. Okay.
Chairman, can I just wait 1 minute? I think there's a problem with our IT.
Okay, we'll just hold on for a moment till we sort out some IT problems.
I haven't got a picture. I haven't got the screen. I'm in the right meeting. If you're there, and everybody's in there, so I don't know whether.
We'll show it then.
Yeah, I've just got people coming through. Oh,
Yeah, wind damage. How is wind damage?
the camera.
Nice, can you do it, please?
Well, we have one funny enough. We've got the toilet trailer, damaged door and that, all damaged bottom down. Only a couple of miles away. That's good.
That's one of somebody that's coming.
Is AI just started already?
Yeah.
Do you see the screen? No, still nothing coming through. I'm gonna come out. Right, yeah,
Are you in,
it's now
Layla?
working, yeah, I don't, because it was correct. Yeah, it was, yeah, I'll put it down there. Thank
Am
you.
I recording?
Not yet.
I do apologise for that. IT.
I was. Right,
Right, I think we're ready to
let's
go.
go
Okay,
quick.
thank you. Right, so we're on agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Sloan, would you like to take us through the declarations, please?
Thank you, Chair. So can members raise their hand if they have a declaration of interest, please? So Councillor Bradford,
I've made comments on both reports of the committee in respect of the 2 applications related to Bridgewater Gateway developments. But I have not made up my mind one way or another, and I confirm that I come to the committee with an open mind and will listen to all the merits of the debate before casting my vote. I also declare an ORI, as I am a member of North Petherton Town Council, but have taken no part in these applications at Town Council level. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, councillor Bradford. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair.
sorry, Alan,
Current Drainage Board as well.
and so you're declaring an ORI because you're
Yes.
also a member of the Internal Drainage Board.
Correct.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hendry.
I'm a member of the Expo Drainage Board, but I don't think that's involved in any way with these
I don't think
applications,
it
but I
is,
just
yeah.
mentioned anyway, okay, thank you.
Councillor Slocum.
Just to know why because I'm a member of Bridgewater Town Council, but I've taken no part in any discussions on this.
So Councillor Bruce,
Yes, all right, thank you for the drainage board.
and Councillor Pearce.
ORI for me also as a member of Bridgewater Town Council, but I haven't taken part in any discussion.
So,
Sorry,
Councillor Bradford,
one other thing, I'm a trustee of Willstock Hub.
is that a body appointed by the council? Are you are you a member in control or?
No, just an
Have you
ordinary
taken
fellow.
any part in any of the
No.
discussions? Okay. Thank you. So, where members have heard that, there are members on a committee that are members of organisations and parish or town councils and internal drainage boards, when they say that they have taken no part, it means that they have taken no part in the consultative stage of the process. And so because they've taken no part, they've come to the committee with an open mind. And because they come to the committee with an open mind, they're prepared to listen to all the merits of the argument before casting their vote, and therefore they are able to do so under the council's constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public question time. There are some speakers registered today, and I'll call you to the front table here when we are prior to considering the applications. So that takes us on to agenda item 4. But before we commence that application, I just want to bring members' attention to agenda item 6, which is the confidential viability report. It seems pointless to have it at the end of the agenda because if there's any discussion about that, it needs to be prior to the applications. If anybody wishes to speak on this item, on the report, can you please let me know, because we will need to go into exempt a meeting and exclude members of the public. Not unless anybody wants. Unless somebody lets me know, I'll take that as a no. Okay. Okay, so that takes us straight on to agenda item 4, which is the planning application for the Bridgewater Gateway development. This is a hybrid and outline planning application. Mr. Noon, would you like to take us through the application, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to sort of give an overview of what we're looking at today, as we have 2 applications, both at the Bridgewater Gateway allocation, which is I think B policy B4 of the local plan allocates the site for development as a whole. It's been split into 2. So the first application on the agenda is I think it gets referred to as the Bocklock application. So this is the one before us first, and then the second one is the Vistry They have a certain amount of shared concerns and shared information. They share the same access arrangements, and overall viability has been assessed as one piece of work. So I'm referring to those that bit of work sort of jointly on both applications. So there will be a bit of duplication in the presentation and obviously in the report as we get through that. But the one that is first is this hybrid application on behalf of Bocklock. There are the vast majority of it, 346 dwellings, we have in detail. And then there is a little small site just off one side of the access for 15 in outline form. Access is for that element is to be considered now, but it spins off the detailed access that we'll be looking at in relation to the 346 properties. Got a couple of little updates before we start in terms of one late comment from a member of the public who raises concerns that with things still not finished at Stockmore and Wilstock, this will just cause more problems, car dumping, the estate being treated like a car park and the surrounding green space not being taken care of. I think those are probably issues in relation to what has been going on at Stockmore and Wilstock over the years. Yes, that site is still sort of finishing off in some respects, but it's not part of this application. But then also going on to raise concerns that we do not have school, medical or road infrastructure that can cope with these additional homes due to council planning and the lack of management of the estates. And then they refer to that there is a current application in for Lidl, which I can point out where that's going to be, but it's for a food store on the edge of the gateway allocation. And their concern is it will make, the increased traffic will make it difficult to get out of their homes during the summer. Given the accesses are sort of separate from those two, I'm not really sure I understand that particular point. And then just going on to raise concerns about impact on wildlife. The applicant has sort of asked me to sort of remind members that whilst the highway officers are concerned about the access arrangements and their adoptability because of the normal practice of highways is not to pick up roads that run through solely through industrial areas. So at the point where the gateway site was built out, as we will see to the extent that it has been built out, they weren't planning on adopting these roads because they were only serving industrial areas. But they did, however, monitor what was going on, and there was what was known as a ghost Section 38 agreement, which essentially means that they had oversight of the construction of those roads, such that in the future, if they come forward for adoption and there is public benefit in doing so, then they are adoptable. And this document that I've been passed, which is the council branding, but that confirms that those roads have been laid out and constructed appropriately. And that would come in due course once the houses are built. If they are built, that would constitute the public benefit that would justify adopting those roads. So not an insurmountable issue. And then I've just been asked to remind you by our education advisors that this development, taken together with the other one, will generate significant pressure on education in terms of altogether a demand for 46 preschool places, 164 primary places, 72 secondary school places, and 5 for SEND, special educational needs education places. They, as noted in my report, they are accepting that the situation is that any education contributions to expanded schools locally would have to be subject to a bid to SIL, the SIL funding, community infrastructure levy money that will come forward on the back of this development. That is the position we have taken on all our similar developments where there isn't a school on site. We do look at it slightly differently where the allocation has a school on site. But for a site that doesn't have a school on site, our view is that SIL would be the funding mechanism for those education places, which is as said in my report. But they just wanted to sort of remind you that it will be significant need and that they would have to go through SIL. Okay, moving on to my presentation. Apologies, this is quite lengthy and I will do my best. Let's see how we get the roll on. There we go. Ooh. So there is the south side of Bridgewater, you can see all the motorway running north to south. The pin dropped on the site we're looking at now to the rear of this area of sort of built out the commercial first phases of the Gateway development. In just over here, sorry, it's in there. There's the first phases, and there's the road through to Woolsthorpe. So zooming in a little bit, just best I could to outline the site. It is sort of essentially a sort of rough grass, slopes, high point at the east side, slopes down towards the west. And then you can see that there is some development already at the front of the site. The access has already been created off the A38, and 2 roads have been laid out. These would serve this development. Just slightly wider pictures is I've pinched this one off the Vistry application, but it just put everything together quite neatly here. So we can see in orange footpath networks around from where there are some viewpoints that I will come to later on. You can see we have the country park. We'll stop to the rear, stop more to the front. The front area of the site would be built out for the commercial elements. That's all going through the planning system. The little application is over towards this corner here. This is the site we're looking at today, the Bocklock site, and edged in red, the Vistry site, which is the second application. So just really bring it all together, the allocation as a whole. You can see sort of shown on that slide. For the purpose of this application, the red line around the site, and then the access through to the A38, which is why it's quite an odd shape. But that road has been largely built through from the A38 to the site. Just for the sake of showing the topography and the site as it exists, it's all essentially one large open area, more steeply sloping at the east down towards the lower lying areas in the west, which are sort of flood zone 2 and 3, or 3 to the far side. Tiny little strip of flood zone 2 at the edge, and then the rest of the site is in flood zone 1. Features of note, there's a small little scrubby area. There's a couple of trees in here and a sort of tree boundary here, but otherwise very little by way of existing sort of trees or hedges. That's just really to show you the phasing. The blue area is the bit that's covered in outlines. The 15 outline are in there. The rest of this is all the detailed full application for 346 houses. And there is the layout that we have for those houses that are subject to the full element application. The yellow star is for the LEAP, the local equipped area of play. There is a lap co-located there. There are 2 other laps on site. Now, unfortunately, this plan doesn't show them. The plan is not in our system at the moment. I think it's probably an error somewhere along the way in terms of not uploading amended plans. But it does show that there is plenty of space where the additional, the LEAPs would be located, and they would be secured through the Section 106 agreement. We also have, just to note while we're looking at it here, these areas here and here are communal gardens to serve the properties that back onto them. That's a novel feature. It's what it makes up a common feature of the Bocklock housing model and development. And that is reflected in the original development and design principles document, the one I refer to as the DDPD in my report. And there, from that is sort of the indicative layout that document was suggesting as part of our adopted supplementary guidance for this site. So you can see at that point it was suggesting, I think it was a care home there. I think that's fallen by the wayside. But that, what we now have, you can see here, these are the communal gardens. They were shown as part of the supplementary guidance, and then all the commercial stuff towards the front of the site. So I think we do, just flicking back to the previous plan, we are pretty closely following this indicative master plan from the supplementary guidance. And there is just sort of looking in a bit more detail there. They are a mix of 2 and 3-story properties. They, we get onto in the drawing, some are sort of more 3-story in their appearance, front and back. Others are the sort of yellowy one. They're being referred to as the podium units. That's where the land is sloping so steeply. So at one side they're 2-story, but because the land drops away on the other side, you have undercrop parking. So they're 3-story in that elevation. And then so that's the 3-story are red, 2-story are orange, and then those podium split level ones are in yellow. Just for permeability and walking and cycling links, the purple is essentially the cycle links that are proposed as part of the development. This was amended following intervention from the Bridgewater cycling campaign, and this bit here will be to provide a cycle link through to the boundary of the site. And then obviously we have a little pedestrian link here. Again, these connections would come through. There is some intervening land involved, and that will be negotiated with that landowner to secure the access through to the Woolstock Road for pedestrians and cyclists. That I'm suggesting be done by condition, and that would then, we would then work with the adjoining landowners to secure that completion. And then from the landscaping plan, just showing out the sort of the areas, we've got the sort of the lap and the leaf in here. Got room for the other 2, which are for some reason I'm missing in annotation, but we're satisfied that they can be provided. That they were originally going to be doorstep play areas, but our open space officers didn't like that, and he asked them to be upgraded to lap standard, and that has been agreed by the developer. It's just that it hasn't come through on this drawing for some reason. You've got an area over here, natural area for play, and then you've got an ecological feature here, no attenuation features as well. We would have some blue water infrastructure running through the development as well to create a feature for that. And then around here, I think there's just an area of open space around sort of a little group of trees. And then you can just see indicatively the outline element over here. All the detail of that, apart from this all access, would come at a later date. And then just in more detail, just so working out how those landscape plans, very well thought out, sort of your perimeter plan, planting between the site and the commercial, and then obviously at the softer end down at the bottom of the site, at the foot of the slope, you would have room for the sort of landscaping around the edge of the development, so views from the country park and Woolstock would be softened. That much said, the site is rising, so there will always be houses on the hill up towards the top, and then just working around the site, sort of retaining the existing hedge along the south side there, and then very detailed sort of that communal garden in here, which is subject to, I'm suggesting, very strong condition to ensure that the full soft and hard landscaping details of these communal areas are agreed along with their management prior to the occupation in any of the houses that are next to them. And those little houses that are next to them, you can just about see, they do have their own defensible little garden areas, sufficient for people to still have a barbecue and whatnot in there, and then they would share the larger space. And then just going around here again, you can see there's going to be quite a, with some sectional drawings coming in a minute, there's quite a level drop here to make it all work. So this is all landscaping to sort of mitigate that. But as an idea of how the communal areas would work, yes, there will be levels differences in one part. The other communal garden would be less exaggerated, but really this is still showing how this could work. Not saying we condition this to say this is what will happen, but this is how it could look, and we will secure the detail by condition. Just some sections here. You hopefully sort of they're both in the same section, but it's just showing initially when things go in. Yes, the landscaping will take a while to establish. So it's the same section, but it's a couple of years down the line, 15 years growth, just to show how that is envisioned to go to be grown out, and also to show that the planting will be chosen appropriately for the gaps and the space available. So you wouldn't want great big trees in the street scene, so they're smaller specimens, but you want them more robust to the rear. Then just sort of showing the sort of wider views here. So the top one, A, you can just about see down the bottom here. It's just straight through the southern end of it, but it really just gives you an idea of how these levels will be managed. And you can sort of see on the right-hand side, here's one of these podium units with undercroft parking underneath. And then sort of in this particular section, 2-story, but you can see some of the bigger 3-story buildings behind. And then the sort of view here. So that's my eyesight there. D, is that DD? So a view of how these would look sort of with the development in behind. But coming on to some more detailed house type drawings. And then here, this is just to show you where that difference is the greatest. And you would have a fairly substantial retaining wall here. But again, this is showing initially with the planting becoming more established after 15 years. And then just some wider views here. So CC is the view from the west, looking across the open space. And then just sort of through the slope there. So top one, DD, is looking through the middle here, this section down the bottom. And then the other one is EE, which is sort of an internal view within the site. So here are some of these units, just so you can see the bottom, the drawing here shows where they are. These are these sort of podium units. So this is the sort of view of the front of some of these buildings in this northern section that would be backing onto the communal area. So you can see that in section 4 here. So essentially similar house types that as we will see elsewhere in the development, but with the undercroft parking. And then just to show you, these ones would be the internal layout here, 3-bedroom. And then sort of in the middle of the site, this little block here, again, this podium unit with variation of materials proposed for the same house type. And then again, here just sort of the internal layout, again, three bedrooms, top drawing. And then right down at the bottom here, these little pink and blue ones. Down here, just again, variety of similar house types, but a variety of materials. Again, undercroft parking, you can see how that will work. So at the rear, in the shared gardens, there would be a 2-story rear elevation. Again, that's just how internally that would work. So just these shared communal areas, just a bit more detail to show the space that will be achieved. So 25 metres back to back, given the levels of separation, that's considered appropriate. They have a small area with privacy fencing immediately to the rear of their properties, so that you still have, the majority of your open spaces is communal. You do have this sort of small area for yourself. Immediate, just prevent any overlooking into your back window, ground floor windows, for the communal area. And then just a visualization of how that could finish up. I do stress this is visualization, not forming part of any approved drawing. And then just moving on just through some various house types here. So here, this is a 2-bedroom property that will be dotted across as per the drawing on the right-hand side, with this appearance here. So again, very sort of common themes in terms of the sort of narrow frontages. Alternative roof forms could have a pitch running front to back or left to right, as per the 2 bottom drawings there. So variations, similar one in a different material. So there are sort of buff bricks, red bricks, and some grey bricks. So there, again, you're just sort of showing the variety as viewed across the open space at the bottom of the site. And then just sort of some images within the site show how the variation of materials would work on individual properties and the landscaping within the street scene. And then just working your way through the other types, the 2-story one, in one brick type, in another brick type, and a third brick type. The block lock scheme being based on modular, the idea is that these things can be sort of essentially pre-formed on site, bought on site, and then sort of individual finishes applied to them. The 3-story ones, you can see just indicated in blue, or dotted mostly within the central part, within the site, I suppose, a couple on the edge there, but sort of keeping them away. Yeah, so they'll be seen within the development. And again, same house type, variation of materials. This one here, just with the red areas, just sort of shows sort of for wheelchair access and mobility access and space that will be achieved in this particular house type. Again, sort of familiar feel to it. Just running through the photograph, stood at the top of the site, back to the site, looking out towards the A38, just show this road is already formed. There it is, running through down past those existing commercial units, and then that's the other bit that goes along the front and then round the other way into the site. And then just looking back from that, see quite extensive engineering work's already done, tree planting already done, tactile curbing, everything's all sort of done and ready for this phase of the development. This right over on the western side of the site, the Vistry development, second application is the other side of this hedge. So this just looking up the western boundary, you can see there's already done, there's already elements of planting, structural planting. Looking across the site, Vistry site, I was probably over here in this corner of the field, looking up that hedge. So just looking across the site, and there's Pemberton there, little clump of trees which are on the adjoining site. And then sort of stepping back a bit further, looking across the site, there's that same clump of trees, but just looking down to the bottom, Stockmore Green just over there. And panning the camera around, there's that little row of trees. If you remember back, I pointed out on the site, effectively the site survey for me. And then just swinging round to and turning around through that gap. There's the other little clump of trees that go into that area of open space within the development. And looking along just sort of straight towards town. And then just sort of moving along a little bit, just looking straight down the bottom. So you can see here, there's some attenuation of properly the roads on the Stockmore site. There's a pumping station that's gone in already as part of that infrastructure, probably. I think that's a foul pumping station, probably to do with Woodstock. And then just pan the camera around there so you can see there's the Woodstock Road. And then Stockmore on the right. And then just stood there looking back across the site. So there's the little clump of trees that are on this site. And there's the clump of trees that are on the adjoining site and Pemberton Church. And then just at a slightly different time of year, just stood at the bottom down next to that pumping station, looking at the site. The panoramic exaggerates probably the dome nature of the hill. It's not quite as domed as that, but just to give you an idea of the raising ground. And then that similar time of year, looking back towards and across the very flat bit at the bottom, that's all flood zone 3, not developed on. Just from the applicant's landscape visual impact assessment, here it just stood down, obviously, on the Stockmore Road, looking back at the site, just to get a feel for it. So this is viewpoint 1, if you look at the bottom right hand side. So from here across, number 2, which is at the bottom, just pulled back a little bit, and there is a right of way sort of back over here. So this drawing here is the local rights of way network, and they basically come along the edge here, looking back at the site. So there is the site for Green Hill. And just moving round a little bit, viewpoint 3, sort of in the middle, straight back at the site. And 4, on sort of the southwest, out over here. So it's down around this area here, path back it is. So this will be our site that we're looking at now, and then the adjoining site next door to it when we get to that. And then just going back to my photographs, looking back up. Houses in Stockmore Hill there. And then looking back down, just sort of. And then looking across here, that area there, just the other side of the pond there, just the other side of that pond, that's the element that is in outline. So that little green area, 15 in outline in there. And then just bring right back on that existing road. And then looking just, this is across those buildings, existing buildings that already front the site. Okay, so coming to the key issues, this is an allocated site. It's in the local plan. It's been adopted for residential development as part of a mixed-use wider development of Bridgewater Gateway. So in that case, from that basis, I think we accept that the principle has been set. The numbers have increased. If we look at, on its own, this is within parameters up to about 400 the local plan policy says. The development and design principles document suggests that could rise to about 470 overall with this site and the Visby site. So cumulatively, 511. We're saying this is broadly within the scope of the allocation without raising, and then we look at the matters of more detail. In terms of the overall design, layout, and landscaping, we accept that it very closely follows the DDP guidelines, which is our adopted guidance for this site. If that document was produced with, in anticipation of this sort of development, modular development. So there are no surprises in what we're looking at compared to what we've previously considered. In terms of amenity, there are no existing residents that will be affected by this in terms of overlooking or loss of light. Yes, some views from people's properties in Woodstock and Stockport will change, but not to an extent that is objectionable. This scheme does suggest a novel approach to private amenity spaces with the shared gardens, but that in itself is not objectionable. There's no reason why that couldn't work. It works in other locations. Bocklock have done it before elsewhere. We did anticipate this coming forward in the DDPD. So again, no surprises there, and we can condition that to ensure that is delivered in an acceptable manner. The access is already in. There is no objection to its use. It's not unsafe. They have had a bit of an issue about whether or not these roads would be adopted. They concede that they are probably adoptable. At the end of the day, if they are private, that doesn't make it unacceptable in planning terms. But the ghost agreement that we have had sight of does indicate that there is a route to adoption. And on that basis, we have no concerns subject to the usual safeguarding conditions. Ecology and drainage issues have been looked at. A lot of time went into, particularly into drainage. The site at the moment is rough grass. There's not a lot of on-site ecology, but there are sort of opportunities to get betterment out of that. And we are looking at sort of ecological safeguarding conditions and obviously the drainage conditions to ensure that is delivered as per our consultees' concerns. All planning obligations in terms of that have been requested have been agreed with the exception of affordable housing. And there we get to the rub in terms of viability. The applicant has put forward a case that suggests that 10% affordable housing across the wider site. And I did say the two have been assessed jointly. So that is their position. We have taken advice on that. That's the table from my report that sort of runs through the big picture stuff in terms of, the top line, what you get for the houses. Next few lines are your costs of getting there. Total costs are about, we allow for developers profit in there. 19, just under 20%, that is considered reasonable. I know we always are concerned that developers are maybe extracting a little bit more than things are worth, but it is a very expensive project. You spend a lot of money in the ground before you sell any housing. It is risky. That is convention that, well, anything can be higher than that. I've seen allowed at nearer 30%, where it's particularly risky development. In this instance, an allocated site is not unreasonable, 20%, just under 20% profit. But there are, on a sloping site such as this, there are abnormal costs of getting all your infrastructure in, getting your roads in, securing the platform to build houses on. So those are high. Sill will be extracted from this development, just over 2.5 million. So that's where the education contribution would need to be sought from. And there are other contributions, just under 500,000 that we've upheld in terms of other Section 106. So that leaves us with a just under 5.5 million for land acquisition, or just under 90,000 per acre. Sorry. So we always talk about site areas in hectares, valuations in always in acres. I don't know why, it just is. However, as long as we're consistent with that, we end up with sensible figures. And established practices, we use the EUV plus, existing use value plus, whereby you assume agricultural land has a certain value. The grant of planning permission uplifts that by a multiplier. In this instance, it's about, we say agricultural land value. I think we've accepted about 8,000 an acre here, and we've increased that by a factor of 11. In this instance, that is considered reasonable. Gives us a benchmark land value of 5.5 million. Benchmark land value is what a willing seller will expect for their land, and a willing buyer will say, yes, I agree to that. If it's too low, the landowner sits on it. If it's too high, the developer doesn't buy it, and the development doesn't happen. So we are sort of caught between a rock and a hard place there. We might think that should be lower. Land, we've got no evidence that the landowner would release it. So elsewhere in Bridgwater, so the East Bridgwater allocation and Cokerhurst, it was around about 11 times this use value. We think in this instance, that's a reasonable on this site, reflecting the constraints here. It's not quite as easy a land to build on. The both lands got their problems. The uplift in this instance is not felt the need to be so high. We are, of course, suggesting that a review mechanism within the Section 106 agreement gives us two opportunities to review it. One, roughly at about commencement, see if there have been any changes in the market that would justify revisiting these things, and one towards the end to see have things panned out differently, and then we would look to recover as much as that improved viability would allow to try and uplift this site, or both sites, because we are looking at this jointly, to as close to 30% affordable housing as possible. So subject to securing that through that review mechanism and the other obligations for Section 106 and the conditions that I've recommended, the recommendation is of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. We have two speakers on this application, and I'd like to invite Councillor Bill Revans to come first, please. As you know, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I was going to be a bit cheeky. I put in to speak on both applications, and my comments refer to both applications. Can I take 6 minutes now?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to speak on this application. The Chief Executive has asked me to remind you that I'm speaking as a ward member and not as leader of council, not declaring any more weight to my opinions as with any other local councillor. I'm sure that wasn't needed to be pointed out, but just to make sure that that is there. So this site was allocated under policy B4. I was not a fan of policy of that in the development plan. I've spoken against it on several occasions, so my position on this is quite consistent. And my difficulty was I don't think it relates well to Stockmore and Wilstock. There's no access from Stockmore and onto Wilstock Way, so it created an isolated community. The whole point of Stockmore and Wilstock was that they were going to be village community. I don't know what this is. Is it an extension to Stockmore? Is it an extension to Wilstock? Is it an extension to Northallerton? Nobody seems to know. So in B4, it gives an allocation of 400, about 400 houses. We've got 511. That's a 27% increase. Now, in my book, that isn't about. That is a substantial increase. So for me, I'm not very happy about the density there. If you look at policy B4, there is a sentence that says there will be a neighbourhood centre with appropriate facilities, such as a convenience store and community use. And I've not yet seen the convenience store and community use anywhere demonstrated. I would say it's not compliant with policy B4. We've heard about policy D27, education use. I'm very excited to hear the prospect of Wilstock School at last being built out. At the moment, there are 8 spaces at North Petherton School and 14 spaces at Somerset Bridge School. So there's 164 primary school children. So there's an awful lot of primary school children to accommodate. I would suggest if you were minded to approve this, that it should be secured by condition that the school be in place, because the 2 schools that are there, they do not have the spaces. It also has 47 early years places. Now, those early years places would be accommodated at Wilstock Hub, which has planning permission, but it is currently slightly short of funding because it needs to be because of the rising cost of construction. So you'll appreciate that we're not sure we can deliver all of those 47 spaces in the immediate area. D6, affordable housing, 30% down to 10%, 120 affordable houses down to 51. Really concerned about this reduction in affordable housing. Understand the points about viability and why that's policy compliant. However, this is deeply disappointing. Should you be minded to approve it, I would ask that you consider a condition for local occupancy for those houses. If we look at the Home Finder statistics, we are seeing an extraordinary demand for houses within North Petherton, a Tier 1 settlement. We see extraordinary demand, and the local need isn't being addressed. I see that on a regular basis. So if we could secure a local connection occupancy, that would be that would remove my objection there. Really pleased to hear about the ghost assurances about highways. I had thought that D14 would be grounds for objection, but I'm not sure I believe in ghosts. So I would like that nailed down a little bit more, if that's possible by condition, if you don't consider it to be grounds for objection. What I really don't want to see is unadoptable highways going up to a significant number of houses. I say that because of all my prior experience with Stockmore and Wilstock, which is something that troubles us every day. I will say something positive about this. I'm really pleased to see £304,285 for a health centre. As some of you may be aware, North Petherton Health Centre, the lease runs out in 14 years. And the CCG never asked for any money from previous applications in the area towards a new surgery. That will go some way towards it, but it's not. It's a lot more. A lot more would be needed. I'd love to see that, if it's possible, to secure that by condition, that it be ring fenced for North Petherton surgery rather than just go into a general pod. So in conclusion, I'm against the 2 applications that will come before you, and I think I've explained enough grounds for you to vote against them. However, should you be minded to support, I've suggested conditions around ring fencing the money for a GP surgery, to say that until Wilstock Hub and Wilstock Primary School are built, there should be no occupancy on site. The 10% affordable housing should have a local connection policy, and that we should ensure that the roads are adoptable rather than a ghost agreement. I hope you will consider my suggestions of conditions appropriate for your deliberations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Just well timed. I'd now like to ask Ian Jewson to come to the table, please. You have 3 minutes. If you let us know when you'd like to start, we'll set the timer. Thank you.
I'm ready, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, members. My name's Ian Jewson. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the applicant book club. As you've heard, this application is on allocated land within the adopted local plan. It is a key part of the spatial strategy for the area. It's really important that sites such as this come forward to prevent speculative applications elsewhere. Previous owners of the site selected Booklook as a prospective developer in 2021, and since then Booklook has engaged with the council and other stakeholders to bring these proposals forward. This included pre-application discussions with officers and public consultation with local residents and the town council. Since submission, the application has been has considered consultative responses and made changes to reflect their concerns. The development will use modern methods of construction, which typically means that 90% of the homes are constructed off-site. This means a shorter construction period, less waste and less deliveries, safer, faster and less disruptive for neighbours. This sustainable approach creates a fraction of the embodied carbon when compared to a traditionally built home, a key objective of Somerset's climate emergency. Careful attention has been given to the design and appearance of the development, including the approach to green infrastructure across the site. Importantly, the proposal is consistent with the Council's adopted design principles document and supported at a local level by the Town Council. Access to the site has been designed to relevant highway standards, and the intention, just to confirm, is that the roads within the site will be formally adopted. This is also the intention for the existing roads on phase 1, as you've heard. And also, if you've heard, this has been subject to a full technical approval process with highway officers. The topography of the site is challenging, and along with other market factors, has raised viability concerns, as you've heard. Buccleuch has therefore worked closely with officers to agree the overall Section 106 package and level of affordable housing that can be realistically achieved at this time. Discussions have been undertaken transparently and by appraising the whole of the allocation area, including the other proposal before you today by Vistry. Importantly, though, all of the affordable housing required from both these developments will be delivered on the Buccleuch scheme so that delivery can be as early as possible. And again, as you've heard, a review clause has been embedded in, or will be embedded in the 106, so that if the financial situation improves over time, the affordable housing offer can be reassessed. Overall, we have taken considerable time and care on these proposals before bringing them to you today, and I very much hope you can support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moon, there are a number of issues raised there. Would you like to respond to those things?
Thank you. The highways point about the adoptability of the road. I think we have no doubt in our minds as officers that these are adoptable with the goodwill of our highways colleagues. Conditions, page 54, in highways conditions start. We are suggesting that their normal conditions to agree in technical specification, condition 19 in particular, and that there does have the tailpiece in that condition. No part of us, to require no dwelling shall be occupied until the approved highway works for that part of the site have been carried out pursuant to an agreement or agreement made with highway authority under the relevant section of the Highways Act. So that I think does cover it in there. The difficulty you have, and knowing what I do about Stockport and Woolstock, is it's not a quick process. And I think if you go digging in many estates that have been built across Somerset, not just in our area, that highway adoption does come online quite late because they want to see the roads being built properly. They want to make sure they can survive the wear and tear, so that any damage that is occurred effectively during the warranty period is fixed by the developer. And once all that snagging is done, then they are adopted. I think we to go any further than that condition suggests, I think, is to try and embroil the planning department in a debate that will happen anyway between the developer and the highways department to secure the adoption of those roads. No developer wants an estate that big to be private. That's just a headache. So I have no doubt that this will come forward for adoption in due course and subject to the usual technical approval, all the securities and insurances and the caveats that go with that, then eventually it will be adopted. What we can't do is make it happen any quicker through planning powers. So I think we've got that point. In terms of the GP money, that should certainly be certain. We wouldn't be able to spend that anywhere else, and I think that would come in the section 106. If we need to, there's bottom of page 47, contribution towards provision of GP services to meet the additional need arising from the development. There has to be a bit of flexibility as to where that could be spent. It's not to say that surgery over there would automatically be the receiving surgery if the same impact could be meant by one over there as well. So I think the flexibility is there in the bullet point I'm suggesting to enable the NHS to target it to the right place without being tied down to a surgery that maybe turns out to be utterly the wrong place to spend it. So by saying it has to meet the additional need arising from development, that implies it's local. If members wanted to make that closer, wanted to find that point a bit tighter, then that could be come out in debate, maybe even tie it to a certain parish or town council area. Ghost agreement, that's unfortunately, I'm actually holding a ghost in my hand. It's just a term that highways use because they haven't actually done the agreement. It's basically a dummy, it's in parallel. So this is not an actual agreement to adopt the roads, but it's a case of had we going to be minded to adopt them, this would have done the trick. So it's as good a certainty as we can get on that matter. Local lettings, it's not normally our policy. This is a district, well, old money speaking, district-wide allocation. The expectation when Central allocating it, this site for, with 30% affordable housing, this would meet district need affordable housing. We are down to 10%. Now, if we'd have been at 30%, we would have been reasonably confident that local people would have had a good shout on it. Does reducing it to 10% mean that we should give those local people a shout because there's fewer houses? As long as we debate the point and consider it, I don't see a fundamental reason why you can't do it, but it would be unusual on a district allocation and with caveats, to say it might happen. Other point that was raised, first speaker, local centre, the wider allocation, find the actual policy, but let's not forget that we have, let's just find to get my, is it the 8 Dom, P4 Dom? I've got it here, sat next to my policy manager, who will no doubt be able to explain better than me. But the Bridgewater Gateway allocation is across the whole of the site. So the whole of this sort of greyish area is the gateway allocation. We do have some community facility, well, not community, we have some facilities of future residents might value in terms of a coffee shop, possibly a bit more than a convenience store if little application is successful. I think at the time, as this was sort of things were refined, it was accepted that it needn't be on the residential element of the application. There is scope to have something elsewhere. Now, if I've spoken down to Nick, or have got anything wrong on that particular point, do take over.
No, I think there's wider considerations about the viability of delivering services such as this, be it a convenience store or similar, and so the opportunities to potentially link it with the adjacent employment land, so you create sufficient footfall, because the easiest thing in the world is to identify a site, and 10 years later that site has not come forward because there isn't the commercial viability. So we accepted some flexibility in approach here, locating it in a position that we were walking and cycle distance of new housing, but could also serve the current employment land which is being built out. So as a coherent mixed use scheme, and in the local plan it was allocated to mixed use scheme, the facilities were to sort of serve both the commercial and the housing. In addition, there is also connectivity being identified, which would enable, again, walking a cycle distance to the existing quite extensive local centre in Stockport as well. And certainly in the early stages of development, I would suggest that actually access to that Stockport scheme, which has quite a range of shops and facilities, you should not discount that as well, because again, that's within walking and cycle distance.
Just one other point, I'll just note, the increasing in numbers from 400 to 510, I think it's on calculated at 27%. Yes, that is clearly an uplift. In my experience elsewhere, where we have got bogged down with arguing numbers, at that level, I've not come across a successful argument to say that sort of increase is beyond the pale. Unless it brings with it another harm, the increase in numbers means some other impact is exacerbated to the point of unacceptability. And then that reason for refusal might reflect the increase in numbers. But in terms of just purely the numbers for the sake of numbers, I don't believe 27% we will be supported on as a reason for refusal on its own, unless that brings with it another harm.
And, you know, it's important to, what we're judging it on is the 470, which is in the adopted development guidance, which the council unanimously adopted, versus the 511. So, and that's on the basis because more detailed work was undertaken. We've already seen as well that for a site of this nature, quite an innovative approach has been taken to dealing with the levels and having communal space. At a local plan level, we'd have literally taken a combination of the densities of Stockmore and Wilstop, very traditional sort of, you know, development layouts, and placed it over the site to give an indication. The development design guides were able to look at the topography, the open space requirements, different ways of achieving that. Hence, certainly the 470 in that document, and that is material consideration. And the development design guidance is a requirement of policy to be prepared before we consider the planning application. So I think it's important in that context. And just in the wider context, the local plans housing figures are expressed as the minimum overall in terms of our requirements at Bridgewater and the surrounding settlement.
Thank you. Mr. Neal and Mr. Tate, reference was also made to school places. And at the point of construction for the school in relation to construction of the homes.
I think 2 points on that. Firstly, that I don't think it would be justified to tie the delivery of this site or occupation of this site to a matter over which the applicant has no control whatsoever. Policy of the council, as far as this development, is that a bid can be made to SIL funding. And that is the delivery mechanism, well, not the source of funding for the school. So I don't think you could reasonably do that by way of condition. There was another point and I've forgotten that now. The Wilstop school is, that's an allocation in the Wilstop site, whether that has funding from other sources, but the SIL is the bit that contributes to education from this development.
I just thought I'd expand a little bit on that. Obviously, there is outline planning permission granted for a school as part of the Wilstop 3B consent. That area of land is or has been transferred over to the council for them to apply for funding as in which they feel it needs being done. Whilst the needs of the figures that come before us when we determine planning applications obviously show a fixed point in time, that does fluctuate, as we found with a couple of other sites. I think in Highbridge, where we've exceptionally granted release of white land to give over a site to education, and within a couple of years that needs flipped again in terms of birth rates and when occupations are going to be sort of found for the school. So it's a little bit of a fluid issue. The fund is there through SIL. The process is there for education to apply for the fund. There is a site with outline planning permission granted. So in terms of the ability for the education element of Somerset Council to meet the requirement, the mechanisms are in place. So we're not raising it as an issue for this particular site. In terms of the Wilstop Hub, I'm aware of the long running history in terms of trying to get funding and get it up and running. And, you know, I hope it does, because it would be an absolutely admirable asset. But obviously nursery places will go where there is space for them to go as and when they become a requirement. But obviously, you know, we've got the comment from the education officer from this moment in time. It does flex and change on an annual basis, and it is re-reviewed on an annual basis, and the figures do jump and change. But we were quite happy that there is a mechanism in place, there is a site in place, there is the ability to draw down funding. So it's not an issue we are raising concern with from a planning perspective.
Thank you. I'll now open it up for members' debate. I've got councillor Martin and councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, representatives. I have a couple of questions, well, clarifications really. The first one, I couldn't find a condition regarding the future management of green spaces. I've probably missed it, but is there such a thing, Mr. Noon?
I think usually it's an obligation in the, yes, in the, section 106 agreement, second two points on bottom of page 47, provision and subsequent management of leak, lapse, incidental open spaces, communal gardens. The management of all of that will need to be agreed. And then obviously we've got a landscape and environmental management plan that also brings with it responsibilities of management of the open space. So putting them, both of them together in the section 106 agreements, if we do it one by condition, one by section 106 agreement, you risk getting two management plans that don't overlap or mesh together neatly. So as an obligation.
Fair enough, thank you. And the second one is just the squaring of a circle for me, please. The education officer gives us a number of a total of 6,321,000 dum-de-dum for the totals required with this development, and then states under policy B4 that the funding will be collected through SIL, which is fair enough. But then we have a table that we saw showing a SIL for this development with a total of 2,672,000, which is, you know, a bit less than the 6,321,000. That gap there, what have I missed on this development?
Unfortunately, there is the issue, even if the entire SIL from this one development went towards education, if the sums don't match, that is a conundrum for the funding of education. The removal of education SIL from the equation, the removal and the ability to seek section 106 monies, it doesn't get us any further anyway because of the viability. So if we go back to, you know, it's a very difficult issue. The funding does not match up. Oh gosh. All right, just getting to the.
So just to confirm, while you're doing that, I'll natter on. So I wasn't missing something. We are down by about 4 million on the education funding alone if we snap up all of the SIL.
SIL gets taken for almost every single residential development. So the requirement for this obviously is one block of development, which will have one block of need. The Education Service are suggesting that that need could be accommodated through that contribution. What we don't tend to get is comments from education on individual properties or collections of 4 or 3, or so we actually have SIL receipts for a lot of developments that aren't commented on by education. And as as families pass through the schools, you know, the peaks and flows of children change. So the requests that we've had so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I don't think we've actually had a request from education for SIL receipts to date yet. But we have got comments from the education department putting a price on what they think construction would be, but our SIL receipts are set and were voted on by the council and agreed by the council in terms of what the contributions should be. So unless there's a requirement in the policy specifically saying the site will provide the school, which B4 doesn't, a couple of the other allocated sites do, which is why there's contributions on those. It was agreed at adoption of SIL that it would cover primary school and secondary school places, but Nick, I don't know if you want to come on a little bit more.
You know, it's a very fair point, because in particularly over the last 12, 18 months, what we've seen is the cost of providing education places has risen by some, 60, 70%. That reflects in particular construction inflation, which is significantly higher than normal inflation. and quite clearly our sill rates, which are indexed, but they haven't gone up by the same amount. So there is a disconnect between the two processes. But as was said, effectively there will be a need to take a paper. I will be responsible for actually taking a paper to the Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee, which will effectively set out the priorities for the use of SIL expenditure. And what is quite clear from our education colleagues is the single priority in terms of education provision is the Wilstop School. So we can set out, and it doesn't, as I say, that can be a priority which uses a substantial proportion of all of the SIL pot. Now, you know, that comes with consequences because we'll have collected money from Cheddar and Burnham and the likes, but in terms of education, the absolute priority they're saying is Wilstop, and actually they can manage places in the likes of Cheddar and Burnham in ways that they haven't previously anticipated. But as I say, unfortunately, it comes back to ultimately the viability slide, that we know there is only so much in the pot, and we're prioritising education to a degree and still receipts over affordable housing, but trying to get a balance between still at an acceptable level of affordable housing, all of the other contributions, and maintaining the SIL payments as set out.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. And just you're confident that we're not creating a primary education black spot here? That was a question rather than a statement. Sorry.
I don't think we can ever, you know, in terms of guarantees, as has been mentioned, we're seeing large fluctuations in terms of the demand for places which one year is very high and the next year actually comes down significantly. So, you know, what we are confident on is that Wilstop Primary School will be the priority, and we can prioritise the use of our existing both our SIL receipts we have received in terms of education and those that we've secured. But there's obviously going to be a need for quite detailed conversations in terms of the timing and the ability to bring that forward. Given the wider constraints in the past, we might have had greater flexibility to borrow against future contributions, and clearly we're in a much more constrained position in terms of that. So all I can say, it is challenging, but we will delivery of the Wilstop Primary School through this and our other SIL receipts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford. Councillor Thorne.
Madam Chairman, I'll start with thanking the Adrian New, the planning officer, for putting this together. I've read this 6 or 7 times. I'm still confused now. I think the confusing thing is we've got these 2 applications coming at once today. And I hate having a gun put to me head on one before I agree to the other. I do hate things like that. This is always going to be a very difficult site. Anybody knows the topography? I'd just like a show of hands. How many actually know where the site is to and visited it? It's very relevant. I've been there 4 or 5 times. In fact, I used to farm it, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. And it is a very difficult site to get exactly what you want, so everybody's going to be happy. I was so undecided about things, I decided to take a mooch this morning before I came in here at 10 o'clock this morning. That took me an hour. I went in the front end, Compass Inn, went in over Wilstop Way, and looked at all the pluses and all the minuses. And believe you me, there's a lot on this application, good and bad. We've got to, as a planning committee, we've got to even thrash it all out if we possibly can. First of all, there's only one way into that place, one way out. That's a mistake to start with. If you'd have been sat in my car this morning for 10 minutes and watched the people coming into the coffee shop there at I forget the name of the place, I've only been in there once. Costa, that's it. I sat there and I observed. Bear in mind, you've got an access coming in here at the moment for this development, and also there's an application in the pipeline for a little supermarket, and that will possibly come in the same way. And there's no way out. There's no way out. There should be a way out on the bottom of Wilstop Way. and you can manage it for a cycle path, and I'm sure we can manage it for a transport lane. That would take a lot of pressure off and make it a lot better, in my opinion. I could talk about this for 20 minutes. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bore you. I hope I never bore you. And you've had all the technical facts from Councillor Revens. And believe you me, he goes into great detail when he goes into all this, and sometimes makes my job easy. I'm going to talk as an ordinary fellow, etc., right? Right, I've been in the place this morning. I look at the topography on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops down into the floodplain of 3, 2, 1. I'm thinking to the people that bought expensive properties out at Willstock development, which are very, very expensive, quality, good houses. And every time when they come out through Willstock Way, they're going to be looking right into what isn't going to be just a grand development. It's going to be a different thing altogether. And I just wonder whether this is the right thing for North Petherton. We did have a site visit to Bristol, the North Petherton Town Council, and there was a bit wavy, etc., regarding what it looked like. And we came back, and most of the council agreed it was a good thing. But I had a different view. I can probably visualize things a lot better than other people. That's one of the qualities that farmers have got. And when you come out through on that Willstock Way and look into the different phases, and it's going to be 15 years before any planting materializes to absorb any of the impact, I just get a bit worried sometimes. I'm not too impressed with the 10% affordable homes. But when you look at the contributions to maybe a medical center, maybe a school, maybe the Willstock hub, and this is a very delicate balancing act. Because without these things, some of these things will never happen. So I'm in a very difficult position today as a councillor. Without compromising some of these things, you're going to make the right decision sometimes, and it's not always easy. And this site is not an easy one. And I wonder what would happen actually if sill payments weren't in the equation at all. What would happen then? Think about that one. Just eradicate sill altogether. Right? And I think people would have a totally different view on a lot of these things. But I do feel sure that if people walk the site, they would have the same concerns as I have. In fact, 25 years ago, I lost the front end of my tractor. I was baling and I went on a badger set. Straight down, just like that, right? I was okay, the tractor was all right. The badgers never come back. But most of those have disappeared now and they've gone as the houses and development happens, and they've all disappeared, gone off somewhere else. So I am very familiar with all this, and we always try and do our best for our local community. That's always got at the back of our mind. But we've got to get these things right because they're going to be there for 60 years. Not 6, not 5, it's 60. And I just wonder the durability of some of these new houses are being put up. Right? I'm not going to stay here and, I had to be honest, because I don't want somebody coming up to me and saying in 5 years' time, Alan, some of the houses ain't very good down there. I'm 77 now, actually, so I'd be 92 before the trees come. I should probably be 82 before people start moaning at me. So I'm going to stop there. I think I said enough. People get a general picture of it all, but it would be good if people took a look at it so they knew exactly firsthand exactly what they're dealing with and what they're going to vote on today. Because it's not an easy site for anybody to work out, never mind who it is. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bradford. There were at least a couple of points there that officers may wish to respond to. One around the road infrastructure and lifespan of properties.
First one, in terms of the lifespan of what is relatively new, understanding they do come with normal, well, akin to a normal warranty from the housing. There's no reason to assume they will be any less durable than other modern build houses. And to a certain extent, really a planning consideration. The quality in terms of what they look like is the material planning consideration, the space they provide, the normal planning considerations. The fear that they may not last as long is I don't think really one for a planning committee or indeed a planning officer. That much said there. The other point, the road, it is not a requirement of the supplementary guidance for there to be two ways in. So I'm just trying to get back to that aerial photograph. There it is. So yes, this is all one entrance in through the site, sort of next year between the Costa and the hotel, sort of down in about here. That is what the allocation says. The highways officers are fully aware of the extent of the allocation, how much employment land, how many jobs are likely to be created there, and the likely traffic movements from 510 houses. So they are happy that a single way in is appropriate. They haven't raised that as an issue. They're always nervous about creating wrap runs. If you put a way onto Wilstop Way from the sort of bottom corner down here where the cycle route would be you probably just get wrap runners who don't want to wait for the traffic lights going through there, which may be counterproductive. There's no highways requirement. I can see the reservations about all in and out through one entrance. It is a very substantial entrance. I think if you've been out there, it's almost 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out. So it doesn't run the risk of a normal sort of entrance into a residential estate or being blocked by one accident. There's always, there will be a way around. I think that may be why the highways officer has not, there was never an expectation that this would have an emergency way in or out. But yeah, that's just how the allocation has worked out.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Thank you very much. Again, as the previous speaker, it's a mixed bag for me, this application. It is an allocated design, and those who've been around in the previous incarnation at Sedgemoor will have been to this site on probably more than one occasion, because we had site visits out there as a committee. We had study tours out there as well to look at what was developed in the previous phases as well. Topography is an issue on that site. I must admit, from my own personal point of view, that the design and layout, I'm not as happy with it as I would have liked to have been. The design is quite urban for what was designed as the gateway site coming between North Petherton and Bridgewater, but it's a type of development that obviously has been elsewhere, and the beauty of those sort of developments will be in the eye of the beholder. So I'll leave that to others to decide whether it's ideal. Again, infrastructure is an issue here, and if only we had a council that dealt with planning, education and highways. Oh, hang on, no, we do. So hopefully we now can deal with that in-house, and make sure that our departments are talking to each other rather than throwing rocks at each other, as we maybe have done a few times in the past. I mean, this ghost agreement, I'm really pleased to hear that we've got something there that can be tabled to say this should be done, because like Councillor Evans said, I am appalled at the idea of significant developments like this being on unadopted roads. It's just not the right way to go. It's just poor practice, and I would hope that our highways department will make sure that that's not the case. In terms of education, again, I agree totally with the ward councillors. Those of us who sat here a long time ago allocated Wilstop school site on the previous developments to serve the forthcoming developments that were coming forward. If this doesn't warrant that happening, I'm really disappointed. And as the Vice Chair said, the slight concern is the gap between 2 million contribution and 6 million cost, the various education elements. But again, let's hope the ward councillors can put pressure on the council to deliver Wilstop School, because it is critical for that area. The surrounding villages are stacked to the gunnels in terms of their kids in school. So that is something, again, I hope we can take forward. Couple of questions I'd like to ask, if I can, just to get some reassurance on some of the smaller items though. We saw the illustrations of properties that have the undercrop parking. I would just like reassurance that undercrop parking is actually of a size that deals with modern vehicles, because having witnessed that in my own patch on developments, sometimes it doesn't. In terms of bicycle access is reported in the report that says we're encouraging people to go by cycle, and then we're in a position where you can't actually get the bikes through because there isn't enough room. So can I be reassured that that has been looked at and dealt with? In terms of parking, the report says that this is substandard in terms of its number of spaces, and I'd just like some reassurance on that, because again, we've all seen illustrations of estates where you can't drive down the road properly because you've got vehicles on both sides and making it almost impassable. So again, we'd like some clarity on that. And the final one from me at the moment is affordable housing. Could you just clarify the tenure of affordable housing that we are looking at? The report referred to different types and level of tenure. I think it was the last one I was trying to see was that it's 25% of the one particular allocation, and then the 75 was all going to be rented. But I just wanted to confirm that was the case. And I would agree with the ward councillor again in terms of a local letting policy. I think we could make an exception this site to say that the first 10% is allocated as local lettings, and then any extra that comes through because we've done the reassessment, that could then potentially be open so that you're not making it a local letting on all of it, which you could make the case to say that because this is an allocated site, and therefore it should normally be open to everyone. But I think we could make a case to say because we reduced it so much, the first 10% goes local, and then anything over that, we could then make the argument that that's open to anyone. But we'll be interested certainly in the answers if you've got some, please.
Affordable housing first. I've left it a little bit looser in the obligations for 51 affordable housing units. My understanding is that will be requested as 25% first homes, because we are obliged to do that, and then all of the remainder, 75% social rent, the most affordable. And I think that is going to be the starting point of my affordable housing colleagues. So that's what will be asked for. I think it's a perfectly credible case there to be saying the first 10%, if we are reduced, that should be in the first instance available local people with appropriate local connections. We are technically in North Peverton. I don't know whether we make that Peverton or Bridgewater. I don't know. Members might have to mull that one over. In terms of the parking, yes, we are light on the parking if we rigidly apply the North Peverton parking standards. However, a credible case was put forward to say, well, the reality here is this is more akin to Bridgewater, the lower parking standards that would be applied there in parking zones A, I think. So I have sort of gone into that in my report, and we have essentially accepted that there is a case to say we can fall a bit short of what would normally be Peverton standards, given the site-specific location, site-specific considerations of the location being effectively the edge of Bridgewater as opposed to Peverton. And I appreciate that may not go down well in some places, but Nick, you're involved in that.
Yeah, I'm far enough away at the moment anyway. Because I have been to the odd meeting where North Peverton and Bridgewater and Stockman Woolstock controversial issues. But I think it just in terms of context though, in terms of a local plan, and this doesn't reflect parish boundaries, but in terms of a local plan and the spatial strategy, this is an allocation under the Bridgewater as a principal town. It's North Peverton as a tier 1 settlement has its own policies and allocations. So that sort of supported that justification that notwithstanding the actual parish that it sits in, it was allocated, those 500 units were allocated as part of the overall focus on Bridgewater, and therefore justification for looking at that slightly lower amount. I fully accept, and I mean I've been around Stockmore, and it is really hard at times to drive past, but fundamentally as a council we are looking to encourage alternatives to the car, and so the wider walking and cycling accessibility. The fact that it's a mixed-use scheme immediately adjacent to employment, potential to reduce the need of travel. Hands up, we know there's not a direct relationship between reduced car parking spaces and reduced car park use, but having some flexibility on that and some slight reduction, I think is appropriate in what is fundamentally a mixed-use scheme allocation of Bridgewater policies and sales. Just touching on the affordable housing, we have to just be a little bit careful, but we've had effectively a local lettings light policy, which I know we've used with 99% sure we use with Cheddar, only because there are going to be circumstances when people in the most acute housing need, you know, surely the priority will be to house them in preference to someone who is in a band B or C that happens to have a local connection. So the way that it was drafted was, it certainly is a local lettings policy, but it did have a caveat that those in the most acute housing need, if necessary, would be prioritised. And so we can use, I'm sure we can use effectively the wording that we've used elsewhere, because this has definitely come up in Cheddar, I think, with how we've tried to put an element of local priority on there, but the caveat that, you know, if there's acute housing need, that should still be prioritised.
That's the film.
Yeah, it was just the other thing was going to just if you can clarify the cycling and the parking spaces. There was one other thing I wanted to add, which I hadn't mentioned on my list before. There is report that normally this site should require a mugger. We're told in the report it doesn't require it because it's available on Wilstock or Stockmore. The only query I had was, how do the residents get to Wilstock or Stockmore, bearing in mind at the moment the pathway doesn't connect down to Wilstock Way, and there potentially is a ransom strip in between with another landowner by the sounds of it. So we in one breath say that we want there to be the connectivity and we want the people to have play area available, but are we actually having a play area that people can get to? Because if the kids are having to cross Wilstock Way, which isn't always the quietest of roads by any means, so just wanted clarification on that again.
Yes, the mugger, it was agreed that mugger provision could reasonably be relied on at Workstop or Wilson. It's close enough, it's got the capacity. The links to it would come, as I think where that drawing gone. So we can only expect the developer to provide the red line, provide the footpath to their red line, to the boundary of their red line. We cannot compel them to go across third-party land. That is unfortunate here. The reality is that having provided those, there would be an incentive, and we would have, as the council, have to get involved, no doubt, try to secure by negotiation the remainder of that. We don't believe it is unachievable. We do know who the owner is. They are not unapproachable, and there have been some scoping exercises to that extent. The other reality is that people will make it happen. There is already a footpath across there. I went on site yesterday. There's evidence that dog walkers, others may have got on site, and people do find a way around these circuits. It's not ideal. I'm not holding my hand up saying this is the greatest scheme ever in this respect, but it's the best we can get out of this scheme, given the limitations of land ownership. But we have no reason to assume that is utterly unachievable. But we would need you to acknowledge that, and it would require input from us to complete that. On the parking issues, the highways advisor tells me that, you know, the parking set has not objected to the size of the parking spaces. I appreciate Undercroft garage spaces, well, garage spaces certainly are possibly not used for parking in. Evidence that other Stockmore may indicate that the garages are full of other things. These at least are the benefit, as shown on the drawings, they are open. You know, if there is a sort of a worry, I'm trying to again. They are of a size that you can get racing cars in there. If members' concern is that they would be lost if they were not used for parking, I think there is a condition suggesting that the areas for parking should be kept for parking. Technically, that would include the undercroft thing, but members may wish to say, well, do we want an extra condition there to say there shall be no gating of those? No, not putting garage doors on, simply because as open, as shown on that drawing here, they're not particularly secure, so people aren't going to fill them with washing machines and freezers and what have you. Whereas if they put doors on them, then that might encourage them to cease using parking. We can only require them to be kept available for parking. We can't make people put cars in them. That's the problem. And that's human behaviour, I'm afraid. But if there was a real nervousness, we could remove the permitted development right that would otherwise allow people to put garage doors on them. I think I've got a condition, like bin and cycle stores to be agreed. Is that, just going through my condition 16. So we would secure that. We would see the detail. I think it's indicated at a certain level within the supporting information in the application, but we're certainly alive to that, and we're suggesting we can deal with that. Just the other thing I've written down, design wise, now I appreciate these houses are, they're new. We haven't got these yet. They have been built elsewhere. Whether these would sit comfortably in an infill site in urban Bridgwater, different matter. But on this site, it is very much going to be seen in longer views from the west. It will be seen, if you can see it, with the background of the commercial buildings that will come a little bit further back on the site eventually. So if anything, there will be big box architecture on the hill above them. There would be, to the left, if you're looking from the west side to the north, you would see them in the same vista as houses on Stockmore, but there would be a gap between them. So if there's anywhere around Bridgwater that could take a substantial development of something new, this is probably the site to do that on, in that it is not dictated by context, unless you view the context as big box architecture of the industrial estate, which I don't think we're suggesting we would follow here. They are quality, they are different. And are they bad enough? They're not bad. We're certainly not looking at a refusal based on poor design. And that's not been an issue. This is very much the house types that were envisaged in the supplementary guidance. That much I do accept they are different, and they are on a sloping site, so you will see them in sort of little, they will step up the hill in views of the site from a distance. So you will see them sort of in tiers. So that's a consequence of the allocation of a sloping site, regardless of what house type you do. That's what you'll see. And these, I think, are perfectly pleasant houses, and on a site that's not dictated by context.
One more time, because I've got a number
No
of
more
speakers.
questions. I'm going to make I'll have to move a recommendation if that's all right. And we'll see how the rest of the debate goes. But I'll go with moving the recommendation, but I would be looking for, as the reassurances we've had in terms of the tenure of the affordable housing is made clear in there, that we have 10% with a local lettings, which you say based on the Cheddar model. And I think there was also a request to make sure that the money for the GP services were also ring fence to the North Petherton patch. And on those bases, I'd be happily move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Filmer. Have you made a note of those? Can I just seek clarification on the NHS, the contributions for local GPs? Is there sort of a perimeter, a distance that could be ring fenced to? If I'm just thinking of the potential capacity issues with the North Petherton GPs. But obviously we want the contributions to be very local.
I think we can just clarify towards the provision, towards the provision of local GP services to meet the additional need arising from the development. Until we know exactly how that need is arising and what the existing situation is in great detail. For example, if the Petherton surgery is stuck to the gills with people from Bridgwater for some reason, if you expand a surgery in Bridgwater, that would then allow them to move back and create capacity in North Petherton. So if you stick religiously to a geographical area, you may find you can't spend it. So I think you do need flexibility, and if we put it towards the provision of local GP services, I think that would give us a degree of understanding of where members' wishes lie without handcuffing people to one particular surgery, which might prove very difficult to deal with.
I think thinking is so long as it's
Some middle ground. I think what members could reasonably do would be sort of ring fence it to North Petherton stroke Bridgewater, because what you wouldn't want to do is put it towards a particular project, and then if there were issues with that project and it stalled and didn't come forward, in 10 years' time you will relinquish those funds and you haven't met the need. But I think if you've got flexibility of North Petherton stroke Bridgewater, you've got enough capacity to build up capacity somewhere close to where the impact of this development would be. So arguably for us, that would meet the policy test in terms of it would be reasonably necessary to meet the needs of this development.
happy with that. I'll go on to the next speakers now, and then we will come back to the recommendation, I think, after that. Councillor Grimes, and then I've got Councillor Hendry, Councillor Slocum, Councillor Bruce and Councillor Bradford. Thank you. So, Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I've got a lot to say now. I think all the questions that I had have been answered by my fellow councillors. I think the police report on crime prevention was concerning, but that was just an observation really, so I don't think I've got anything else to comment on that. The answers that we've been given, I would be quite happy to second this recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Grimes. Okay. So that is seconding the recommendation to approve with the ring fencing of NHS contributors. Would you like to read?
So effectively, it's seconding the application as written with a local lettings light wording for the affordable housing, and ring fencing the contribution towards North Petherton and Bridgewater. The one thing I wasn't clear on was a comment in terms of enclosing the undercroft parking, whether you wanted the condition added to remove PD lights to have it closed off. No. Okay, thank you.
So that are the recommendations as standing. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I watched the presentation, first class, no problem with that at all. We heard what everybody had to say. I did plan to say quite a bit here, but I'm sure you'll all be happy I'm not going to. Everything I could have said, a bit like Councillor Grimes, has already been said and discussed anyway, so it's all answered. Statutory consultees, IDB, Wessex Water, Highways, Police, Ecologists, Environmental Health. A lot of these had concerns at the outset, but that's all been ironed out and it's all taken care of. One of the concerns that I did have, but it's been brought to my attention, was the flood zone 1 dropping down to flood zone 3, but apparently now it's all flood zone 1, so that's all taken care of, not a problem there at all. It comes in with local plan policy B4. Again, no problem there, nothing to speak of. Any conditions that has been talked about at some length is absolutely fine. I'm okay to go along with all that too. Had Councillor Filmer not moved the recommendation, I would have done it myself anyway. So I'll sign off with that and say yes, I'm in favour of it too, with the conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's true to say we are one council now, so we can break down the door. We don't have to blame Highways for not making bad decisions because we're all one. We're all sat in the same pot. But I would say the one thing I don't like is when we leave a legacy to new homes. I don't think they're very attractive. I'm sorry, I don't, but maybe they'll look better when they're built. I don't like the idea of not enough parking. I don't like the idea of the roads being so narrow that it causes that people can't even pass each other. We leave a legacy of bad management, which I don't like, and I feel that's really sad. the affordable housing has been mentioned, so I've dealt with that. I would say about this North Petherton surgery, and I noticed the gas when Bridgewater was mentioned. It's a lovely place, isn't it? I do feel in a way that I think maybe we're not realistic enough to know that Bridgewater surgeries are absolutely bursting. My own surgery happens to be in Stockmore, on the edge. Actually still in Bridgewater, that one, but it's just on the edge, filtering lots of people. But I do think there should be a ring-fenced surgery for this area, because North Petherton has absolutely grown beyond, belief. And I think to have their own surgery is absolutely ideal, and it's what they should have, and it's what we owe them. And I think to have North Petherton people to have to come into Bridgewater is just not acceptable. Not that we don't like them, I don't mean that. Sorry, what I mean is that, you deserve to have your own surgery in your own places. So I would say that I think I would ask them to please look again at that, because I think it should be. Viability concerns I've already mentioned. And I said the car parking. I do think this is a really important issue, and I hope it's just not left. You have a 3-bedroom house, so you get 2.5 parking spaces. Who had 2.5 cars? You get a 4-bedroom house that gives you 3. I mean, it's just, somebody's got to take this in hand and get this right, because it's just rubbish. And if you go into any estates now, all the cars are littered over the roads because there's not enough places. And I think until we take this in hand, until we deal with this and we overturn it, we're giving this legacy to all, new homeowners and rented accommodation and everyone else. And the education as well, I would say definitely that we need to find a way that we get that funding in for the education now, because like I said, North Petherton is growing by the second, and I think we need to open our eyes to that. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slocum. Councillor Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly blunt about this. I'll be as tactful as possible. When I saw the drawings up there on the screen, the first thing that came to mind was they're packed in like sardines. I've got serious concerns about the density and the number of dwellings on this site. I know it's a difficult site, and I'm assuming, please confirm or correct me if I'm wrong, that the density will affect the viability. So that is probably why they're packed in, to make the site viable. But still, that's not acceptable in my eyes. I think it's too much. I think, so I'm going through a few points. So affordable housing, just to clarify, on page 27 of the pack, there's a whole list of proposals that need to be secured by the Section 106. Are we there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just clarify, all of those proposals have all been agreed to be included as what needs to be secured by the Section 106? And if you look at the point where it says the first homes should be sold at more than 70% of the price, I'm assuming that's no more. Again, that's just one of my questions, is can you clarify if all of those proposals are going to be included in the Section 106? Shall I go on with it? Do you want to take one at a time? Go on.
They will be the starting point. Yes, that's what we have asked for in Section 106.
So that will be included as the starting point.
There's always a bit of negotiation, but yes, that is our starting point. And I'm not seeing anything in there that is fundamentally unusual about this one.
So all of those will be included.
Yes.
Okay. Page 22, it talks about the lapse, and that they need to be no more than 100 metres from each dwelling. Is that condition secured? Because I'm a bit concerned that we haven't seen the lapse on, obviously the plans you say weren't updated. So I'd like clarification that that condition is met. I'm also really concerned about the cycle path. I think that we should be looking, and you're probably going to tell me that this is realistic, but I think we should be looking at securing that pathway access before construction. Because you leave it to just go into the edge of the site, it's not going to happen. And you're talking about reduced parking spaces, you're talking about reduced space for cars to enable people to use cycles, but you're not providing sufficient cycle storage or space to get cycles between cars, and you're not providing a path to allow people to use the cycles to get to where they need to go. Those need to be in place before we allow this development to go ahead.
In terms of the lab, the Parks and Open Space Officer is part of the Section 106 negotiation. So as part of the Section 106 negotiation, we agree all the fixtures and fittings that go in as part of the labs, the locations, the sort of siting of those as part of the Section 106 agreement. So in terms of proximity, that would all be set out through the 106 proposal. Without knowing, sorry, Adrian, the exact location of the labs at this point, I can't confirm or deny whether they are all within 100 metres of the nearest property, but that's certainly the sort of the guide that we take for locating them when we're negotiating through 106. And the Parks and Open Space Officer is part of that instruction suite. In terms of the cycleway, viability is challenging, and to a degree that's why you've got the density you've got, because you need to achieve a set value for selling the properties to be able to put back into providing affordable houses. From the viability we've only got 10% affordable housing. That's been accepted. There were discussions at pre-app in terms of this connection point, and the developer is keen to provide this connection point, and we are also keen for him to provide this connection point. If we require them to do that as part of this planning permission, that gives an added value to that strip of land to the other landowner. And the issue is, by requiring it as a consent, it increases the ransom of that strip, then reducing the possibility of it coming forward. We do push as hard as we can to secure what we can as part of the proposal. If we were requiring it, the possibility is there may be even less affordable housing than what we're getting at the moment. So with the balance of the motivation of the applicant and our motivation to try and secure that link with the developer and the other landowner, you know, it is something we are sort of pushing to secure, but we're not requiring it as part of this consent because it would subsequently have impact on viability.
Councillor Bradford, and then Councillor Martin, and then we will go to the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The working from home with respect to a lot of parking. Go most places now, it's chocolate light during the day, or you get there after 5, 6 o'clock. It's just a different, since COVID, everything could just change a little bit. I think the mindset has to come into a lot of people, how it has changed. Personally, my own personal opinion, I'd like to see people back to work. Be a lot easier to get out of people sometimes when you won't get out of people. That's my opinion. I know you probably do more work at home, but it probably cuts both ways. But I'm honest to say what I feel, and that's how you get. And secondly, Councillor Filmer said he wanted money ring fence for a medical GP centre, maybe in North Heatherton. I'm going to ask for the will still have money to be ring fenced and as well. Is that possible? Because, and this is happening, this development is happening near Willstock. It's only 200 yards down the road. It's a major thing regarding that whole area. There's nothing else down there at all. I think to be very, very important if that was, and what you decide now might influence the way I'm going to vote.
There isn't a contribution through this application for community facilities. If there were, it would be reasonable to ring fence it, but there isn't a contribution through this development. So the financial contribution that's set out on page 47, that's for the GP surgeries. So there isn't a second.
Nothing at all.
No.
So Willstock will get nothing out of this at all.
No.
Nothing at all. Can't believe it. And I've been to you today. I can't believe it. I really can't.
I could be really, really cheeky and say that there is a proportion of SIL that goes to the town parish council, but there's nothing in the 106.
Right.
Okay.
I'm-
Thank you. Oh,
I'm
that,
confident.
okay. That has been answered.
I'm
but,
sorry to bore you, but I'm not. I know Councillor Evans I don't care what you think, Joe, whatever you say. So I was gonna suggest a site visit, because there's a lot of people who they don't actually know where the site is, and to vote on things where you aren't sure of where it is, et cetera, and what the ramifications are. I think it's very difficult sometimes. That's all I'm gonna say. The eye never lies.
Thank you, councillor Bradford. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware of my privileged position making the last comment on this. And it is a comment, it's to follow up on Councillor Bruce's comment actually regarding the lapse. I wonder if Mr. Noon could advise. I mean, we said that the plans weren't updated. Is that because we didn't have them or that they haven't?
I don't know. I've only noticed it as I was trying to identify all the lapses on the drawings. And it was a surprise to the applicant as well that they weren't on the drawings. It's an apology to the committee. However, the basic requirement for a lap to be within 100 metres is policy. And that will therefore bind on the negotiations to secure the detail of those laps. If they emerge in a way that is not policy compliant, that would be a problem for the application. And my open spaces officer will certainly be looking at resisting very strongly. And if the applicant were to dig their heels in, I think we'd be back in committee saying, these are the laps, they're not policy compliant. And we would bring it back to committee if they delivered something that the open spaces officer utterly refused to accept. So we will chase that through the system, looking for those to be policy compliant.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, councillor Bruce.
Sorry, point of clarification, at what point does that become triggered? What point, how far into the development can they get before that lap is defined?
This will be before the decision is issued, because that will be part of the Section 106 agreement negotiations to make sure we've got what we think we've got. I'm pretty sure there is one at near the entrance to the southern entrance there, and I think there's another one down at the bottom in that sort of treed area, sort of in the middle at the bottom, sort of roundabout here. So there's one here and one somewhere up here. That's where I was expecting to see them. So I don't doubt we've got them where policy demands them to be. I just apologise to the committee that they're not on the drawings today.
The other thing, just as a point of clarification, in the 106, when they're secured as part of 106, there's usually triggers for the timing of them being provided, which is either linked to occupation number, because obviously when you have X amount of families in there, you'd want provision for those children, or a timing, so within a year and a half of commencement, whichever is the soonest. So usually we trigger delivery like per sort of phases as it's coming forward.
Yeah, I'll just add the other bit here. Councillor Bruce, in terms of the Section 106 agreement, we do have a Section 106 template. I'm not saying it can't be altered during negotiations, but the template actually does set in stone at this moment in time as a negotiation point. But it's also part policy, like was explained before, but it does set in stone that the lap will be 100 metres. I'm just getting it up actually. The lap will be, such area will be no less than 400 square metres are located within 400 metres of proposed residential development. That's the LEAP. And the LAP will say such area should be no less than 100 metres square and located within 100 metres of the proposed residential development. So our template does actually have that in the definition, so it's set in stone and therefore enforceable. But I'm not saying that those templates can be checked. I'm not saying these templates can be guaranteed, because sometimes they are changed in negotiation, but as the officers explained, it's policy compliant, it's unlikely to be changed.
Okay, so we now have a recommendation for approval of the officer's recommendation with the amended conditions regarding local lettings and ring fencing of the NHS contributions as spoken. All those in favour, please show.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour.
Any against? One against, and that's no, any abstentions? So that's everybody.
That's 10. Yeah, that's 10 members, yeah.
So that is carried. Thank you. Thank you for the debate, members. We'll have a 10-minute comfort break and then return to the next. Thank you.
So the follow-on application adjacent to the site we've just looked at is a full detailed application for 850 dwellings, reliant on access through the scheme we've just dealt with, and their associated works. The updates for this are as per the previous application, in that our education officer stresses the importance of securing appropriate funding for education through a bid to SIL. So that is a common comment, and this one is also affected by the access arrangements through the industrial area that are covered by that ghost agreement that we discussed on the previous application. So moving on, and there will be quite a degree of repetition here, I'm afraid, because so much of this is common to both applications. But there is the application site. It's just to the south of the one we just looked at, and zooming in more detail, edged in red by my hand, so not accurately, but just using our overheads just around the field there. The field to the sort of southeast, that's the bit that gets developed. You see the little clump of trees that we've seen in photographs. That is retained as an area of open space. And the sort of bit at the north or western end, that's all sort of becomes open space and habitat. This scheme isn't required to do biodiversity net gain because it was submitted prior to the deadline, but they have nevertheless achieved a biodiversity net gain that would be acceptable if it were a material consideration. So it's a little bit of a benefit, because I think a lot of the big developers have got on board with biodiversity net gain in advance of the requirement coming in and have been doing it for a while now. So there's the red line application site. One little hedge going north to south across it, and that little clump of buildings, trees in that corner there, and then otherwise you've got the hedgerow boundaries. Again, from the previous application, just to give you the context of the allocation with this site is part of is the Bridgewater Gateway, same allocation, the block scheme that we have just looked at, and the commercial space sort of between the residential and the A38. And then just we saw the pinky draw part of the drawing on the previous application. This is the drawing that extends down into this area. Apologies, the contours aren't on here, but they are still similar to that. But really, the point of this is to show you sort of the limited trees on the site. They are confined to hedgerows, apart from that sort of thing that you see there. So this is the scheme. We do have the lapse and the leap identified here. The leap in the yellow star. So that's sort of incorporated in an area of open space around those trees, where I think that's where the badger set is. So the retained for ecological point purposes, keep the trees, and then obviously create this lap. And then leap, that is the yellow star, then two laps with the red stars, one in the central area and one down at the bottom there. That's the area where there was the one at the western edge. There was concern with the about overlooking, but I think we have accepted that that row of houses opposite would provide an appropriate degree of passive surveillance. The taller building is the block of flats there at the entrance, so very much within the site, as opposed to a high building on the edge. So this is just giving you a sort of mix of materials. I've expanded the key on the left-hand side, but we have a mix of bricks, renders, and tile types dotted around the site. So we get a good match and a good mix of materials. We do have some grey roof tiles in there, but there are mainly sort of double Roman appearance, clay double Roman type tiles, the majority. Just to give you an idea of the drainage scheme on this, it's also similar to the previous one. The water's all collected. This one's just a little more complicated in that the water is picked up through the surface water is picked up under the roads, taken to the two attenuation areas here and here. They then discharge at an agreed rate to the Reen, and then there's this sort of extra little storage area down here as part of habitat, where there would be some additional water taken out of the Reen when that is needed. So overall, the lead local flood authority, the LFA, they are happy with this scheme as they were on the previous scheme. So that's just sort of showing you, again, just sort of picking up the surface water strategy throughout the site. Then just going through the building type. So this is the biggest building, the block of flats at the entrance. So I've got the two roadside facing ones. So that one there, front elevation, and then the side elevation is just on the corner. So a nice mix of materials and detailing. And then just going through the house types, this is one particular house type here that is then varied with different materials, just for the sake of variety. And that's a common theme. They're very traditional house types. And then each house type is then varied with this, buff or red brick, as with this one here. And then you saw the bigger detached ones, one version of that, and then sort of a red brick, buff brick type property, 3-bedroom, this one, and then a larger with rooms in the roof, one, and another detached type here. Again, sort of house types repeated, but with different materials. That one there is one of the larger detached 4-bedroom houses. A different variation, very similar type and approach. Again, sort of variation of brick types, different types of porches, window arrangements, and then one sort of with a little bonnet dormer over the left-hand window on this one, just to bring in some architectural sort of variance across the site. And sort of a variation there on a 4-bedroom house type, just giving it some added interest. And then just moving on to sort of some street scenes. So the top one there, that's where you will see that block flat. So this is sort of the view looking west in the main street through the site. So you can see the block flats on the right hand side. And then that's obviously the biggest property on the site. And then looking across the others, so you've got the rising one there, a C at the bottom. So you can see some of the bigger house types in that view. And then at the edge, more towards the edge B in the middle, you've got generally the smaller house types on the edges. So trying to keep the bigger buildings within the site. And then back to sort of some visualizations in terms of the street scene and how that would hopefully look. And sort of at the bottom of the site, looking for the open space. Then you see it sort of slightly raised relative to that area of open space out to the west. Then just coming to the photograph, so looking into the site, the top one is looking into that sort of position number 1 on that little drawing. They're looking into the site. So it's sort of partly a much smoother grass than the adjoining site. I think probably still in a low level agricultural activity. You'll see there the view of the second one, viewpoint 2. So from the footpath over to the sort of west of the site, you very much seen the previous application, the book block in the background slightly to the left. Then sort of moving across top 1, 3 is looking straight in from the sort of northwest, just looking straight up the site. So the houses would be sort of the other side of the hedge that front divides the site. And then the book block site just shown on the left hand side. Then viewpoint 4 is just looking from above, looking at the back of the site. So again, sort of showing sort of from North Everton, it really sort of disappears in behind the topography of the vegetation on the site. So sharing the same access in through from the A38. So these photographs still sharing through here. So this is all common. That is the main road into the site, which would lead you into the book block site and take you across over to, here's that boundary hedge there. The site is in on the other side. And then just all giving you some sort of context here. There's the site in behind the hedge. There's that little clump of trees that is retained as a feature within the development. And there's sort of the main bit of the site in behind here. So yes, it would be visible in views from Coverton, and that side over, but at some distance. And then just sort of looking down, that's really just showing, again, it's across the book block site, and the site will be in here. So essentially the views of the site would be largely contained on the sort of to the north here, would really be seen either across the open land at the bottom of the site or through the houses of the book club site. And then just sort of from the other side, we're right over here. So this is really from the bottom of the hill near Woolstock Road. The site we're looking at is in around these trees over there. So really from these views, it's largely, it'll be the book club site that is seen, and this site, the history site, would be in behind that. And then that's just a similar view, different time of year, just to show that the trees in. So really, the view of this would be from the sort of Pemberton side at some distance, with the book club site in the background. So moving on to the key issues, which are essentially very, if not identical, similar to the previous one. Again, we are on the B4 allocated site. The numbers at 150 in their own right are clearly within the parameters. Again, we consider things cumulatively. Those numbers have moved up as the application is developed. This site is being developed roughly at the density that was envisaged originally. The book club site, with its approach to communal gardens, that's where the density numbers have increased. That's really down to that site as opposed to this site. It's just a much lower density overall. In terms of the amenity issues, again, there are no third-party residents that would be affected by this. It's all about creating appropriate living standards and conditions for future occupiers, which I consider this development does. The access arrangements are from the highway to the site are exactly the same as the book club site. We do have the confidence in this ghost agreement now that will all be adoptable, and then it would come through the book club site, and then this site would then be an extension of the roads within the book club site. Again, ecology and drainage issues have been resolved to the satisfaction of various consultees, and we can condition those as necessary. Planning obligations, we are in exactly the same place as we were with the book club site, in that across the viability exercise has been had been conducted across both sites together. Again, we have all other planning obligations that have been requested have been agreed. So it comes down to what can the wider site deliver in terms of affordable housing, and across the wider site, that is, as we looked at on the previous application, is 10%. All of those would be provided on the book club site. This site initially would provide no affordable housing. But that reflects the overall viability. It's the same table, it's the same exercise. Both the two sites were put together and the viability of the two run together. So overall, we have the gross development value, that's the book club houses and these houses, and the total costs, leaving the residual for 5.5 million thereabouts to that's for the entire site, and that reflects a benchmark value of 11 times the current agricultural land values, which has been considered reasonable. And although this application would have its own Section 106 agreement, then we would be adopting the same approach to review mechanisms, one at the beginning, one towards the end. Any improvement in viability, we would be looking to get this site to as near 30% affordable housing as is reasonably possible. So on that basis, again, subject to the planning obligations as set out in the report being secured through a Section 106 agreement, the review mechanism being secured through the Section 106 agreement, and the recommended conditions being imposed, the recommendation is of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. We have two speakers for this application, and I'd like to invite Gary Perrott to come to the table, please, of the Bridgwater Area Cycling Campaign. You'll have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start, and we'll set the timer.
Ready to start. Thank you. My comments cover both applications, but they in no way affect your decision-making process. The first application fully considers the Bridgwater Area Cycling Campaign, which I am the chairman, and we will be watching with really looking at that site as that develops, Adrian, but we thank you for your considerations in here. What I'd like to take the opportunity to do is talk to you about corridors within Bridgwater and how the corridors are affected by this site and other sites across the town. A corridor for cycling and active travel is approximately 3 meters wide, can be less, but it's a safe route for a 12-year-old child or children or anybody who can go and access across Bridgewater. So we're talking about Puriton to North Featherton, Cannington to Western Zoyland, and there are many other corridors. Corridors cannot be built across the town. In many places, it's an expensive process. Here we have a link to Wilstock Way, which is a corridor. The corridor would be from Taunton Road along Wilstock Way through the Hamp Estate, and then eventually, and hopefully in a few years' time, we'll have a really good quality off-road path across the Meads that will link to Durley. That is a corridor. We must understand that within these housing developments, the movement of cycles is relatively safe. There's limited traffic, there are safety concerns, but they are relatively safe. It's when we're going out onto other areas. So what I'm trying to express here is that in all of your considerations, councillors and case officers, that you think about the corridor. The corridor here is Wilstock Way. And Adrian, I'd love if you could get that resurfaced and adopted. I'd be very, very grateful. I know you can't. But when you consider, for instance, Bower, that has links and estates. Where is the corridor? The corridor is not within the development. The development here has a cycle shared use path. That's okay and that's great, but it's not actually a corridor. It's not what you need to get across town, get people commuting, try and get some of the traffic congestion in Bridgewater to reduce, but obviously I'm not going to go on the soapbox. So I'm just asking you to consider in your deliberations here and elsewhere, please, how do those developments relate and link to other active travel corridors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Evans has already spoken on this one previously, so I will then move to Kate Holden, please. Okay. So 3 minutes from when you're ready to start.
Thanks. My name's Kate Holden and I'm the planning agent speaking on Vistry's behalf today. Vistry are proposing a high quality scheme, which as you've heard will deliver 150 dwellings across a range of flats and various sizes of houses. Sustainability and biodiversity have strongly influenced the development of the proposals. The dwellings will be complemented by extensive landscaping, including a significant area of public open space to the west, children's play areas, incidental planting and trees. Biodiversity net gains, as you've heard, will be in excess of 10%, and all dwellings will benefit from private gardens, allocated parking, electric vehicle charging and air source heat pumps. In light of the discussions on the last scheme I just checked, we're at 437 spaces versus 438 parking spaces in policy. So we're one off policy. The dwellings will be of a predominantly traditional design with a palette of materials chosen to complement the character of the surrounding area. The Vistry scheme will be linked to the Booklook scheme both by vehicular connection and also by a separate footpath link carried within the public open space. And as you've heard, all the highways and footways are designed to adoptable standards in the hope that they will come forward in that way. Vistry's liaise closely with the lead local flood authority and the internal drainage board during the application process, owing to the location of the site close to the Reen, and both stakeholders have confirmed their satisfaction with the drainage strategy provided, and which will include SUDS features adjacent to the Leap, a wetland area within the natural open space to the west. The scheme will be subject to a SIL contribution of just over £1 million. And additionally, a legal agreement will secure a contribution of around £92,000 towards local GP services, the provision of a LEAP and 2 laps and a travel planning package. In line with the viability appraisal that's been accepted by the council, as you've heard, 10% affordable homes will be delivered across the allocation. and those will be delivered early within the booklet site, and this approach has been agreed by officers. The review mechanism that you've heard about will also be included in the Vistry 106 to try and secure an uplift of affordable units should the viability of the scheme improve. Vistry is an established 5-star house builder with a proven track record of delivering new developments. My colleagues look forward to bringing to fruition a considered high-quality scheme in a popular, well-connected location, and we hope we can count on your support today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moon, our first speaker talked about the circle corridor. Is there anything you'd like to respond in regards to this application?
I think I need to really just say that this scheme meshes in quite neatly with the adjoining scheme, the Bocklock scheme, which will then provide for the cycle link through to Woolstop Way with the passage of time. I think a lot of the comments about transport corridors for cycles and pedestrian users, that is, it's a big conversation. Bridgewater is probably overdue a thorough review of such things, and obviously, I'm sure the organisation will be liaising with Mr. Tate to bring that forward through the new local plan. But yes, hear you loud and clear to a degree. Preaching to the converted. It's just trying to get everything to work with the developments as they come forward. But that big strategy that needs to go in as part of the next local plan.
Thank you for that. Members, Councillor Bradford, then Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a lot simpler than the first one, isn't it? That's one thing. I've just got two things. First of all, the 92,000 ring fence for that doctor's surgery. I think that's good. That's regarding it. And secondly, I'm a bit confused. Bionet game was mentioned on this one. I wasn't mentioned on the first one. And I'm really got confused on this one. Sorry, Adrian, that's how I happened.
It simply happens that these guys are ahead of the game. Neither application is required to produce the biodiversity net gains of 10% because they were submitted prior to the introduction of the requirement. These guys just happen to be on the case already, and just as a matter of course did it in anticipation of it coming in. So just simply, well, thank you very much for this particular developer who were just ahead of the game. So I mentioned it just simply because it is a positive for this application. It wasn't a requirement of this application or the other one.
Thank you for the answer. Sounds like these folks will be farming. Thank you.
Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this does seem quite good. I like the idea of the electric pumps and the charging facilities. I think all of these things are really important. I didn't see, Adrian, the design. Could you put the design back up? Sorry, I didn't. I might have.
So I think if I just go to street scenes, how's that? Design
Yeah.
of.
That looks quite nice, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. What I wanted to ask is, will the 92 grand from this development be added to the 212 from the Bostock to make for the health ring fence for the doctor's surgery?
Yes, I think that, yes, it would be. I think, previously we amended my recommendation with regard to the surgery contribution. I would suggest we do the same with this one.
And with your indulgence, Madam Chairman, and this would be called the North Petherton Doctor's Surgery. I think it has to be.
Noted. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could see clarification again. No affordable housing. Now, I understand the technicality in as much as phases at the end of phase 2 and phase 3 would supply the affordable housing quota via a third party. Is that right? And what happens if phase 3 doesn't happen?
This one inevitably will come forward at a subsequent phase to the Bocklock scheme, simply because they are dependent on the Bocklock scheme to deliver their access through. Now, we would be looking at review mechanism. Yes, this site, because we've done everything all together, as a viability appraisal. We have accepted reluctantly that only 10% can be delivered. The Boclock scheme said we will do those. We were happy with that because that's where we would have asked them to be done anyway, because of getting them up front. So this site, the viability doesn't give us more than 51 houses to start with, and we're getting them as early as possible. So this site doesn't have any. So through the review mechanism, then that's when we would get to look at it and see whether or not the viability of this site has improved such that we can get some. The third phase, I'm guessing you're referring to the outline on the Boclock scheme. I mean, yes, they would be captured in the viability appraisal of the Boclock scheme because that would be dependent on the Boclock scheme's commencements and sort of completion dates. Although we're not suggesting we do it on completion date, we'll do it at sort of about probably about 85–90% through. So we can get a good picture there. We can't guarantee the outcome of that. We will need to consider how any improved viability is allocated. Would it be taken? Chances are, if the viability improves at the end, we would have to take a commuted sum because there might not be any houses left to do, or might not be any houses that are suitable for left to do. So that whole appraisal of it, particularly toward the end, is usually quite flexible in that it may well result in a commuted sum off-site to deliver it, simply because that's the best we can get at that stage. But of course, we don't see the end viability until the end. We are where we are on that point. But yes, it's disappointing that this is a scheme, this particular phase, at this point in time, has no affordable housing on it. But that may change when we review the mechanism, the viability at commencement.
I do appreciate that. Thank you for the explanation. I guess I just feel the need to say that if the financial viability of the end scheme is such that they don't make as much money, that's, putting it bluntly, not really our problem. But I understand what you're saying.
The housing delivery is our problem.
Yes.
And we can't reject schemes simply because they are unviable. Our own policies say we will do our best to get what we can, and the viability is a material consideration. Yes, it does feel like everything's weighed against us. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. We accept that viability is a material consideration and have to take the outcome of that as it arises.
Thank you. We shall watch.
On that subject, can I ask that at an appropriate time there's a report back to committee on the viability, whenever there's appropriate times during the development, because this is an important site to us. It's a big site for us. And I think we'd be interested in sort of seeing how it goes viability wise for sure.
I think I'm happy to raise that with the chief planner. Obviously, the one thing we have to do now as one big happy council is we should be doing things consistently. So I mean, I'm aware that we do put on viability clauses on the large allocated developments. I'll have a word with the chief planner in terms of what the other areas do and whether it's something we should feed back into regularly on the committee basis. But in terms of consistency, I'm just promoting that we need to keep everything equal across the area. So I'll raise it as a point of consideration and we can discuss further in the chair and vice chair's meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Hendry.
So again, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation to grant permission. I've seen the presentation, no problem with that. I've had people there to say, so I'm happy to move it.
Thank you. And if that's with the additional wording around the local GPs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Slocum.
So I'd like to second that with the extra wording of the North Peniton doctor's surgery.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder to.
Sorry, I do apologise. Did we get any?
No. Proposer and a seconder for the recommendation to grant permission. Please.
I just want to confirm, I know we're being a little bit jovial, but I just want to make sure we're putting down the right thing in the minutes. In terms of the financial contribution towards the GP, The intent was to ring fence it the same as we did the last one, which was North Petherton stroke Bridgewater.
Yeah.
And then whatever it gets called, when it gets done and contributed is down to developers. But I just wanted to be clear with members, that's what we're doing, not
Yes.
having two separate.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I would like to recommend that we call this the North Petherton. I'm just asking that I'd like to recommend that.
Name it after Jill.
The risk is, the risk is if you are specifically calling this the North Petherton contribution, then specifically North Petherton may get 91,718 and they may get a percentage split on the other figure because it's to accommodate for the local need. And the local need, as we discussed last time, could be upgrading a Bridgewater facility to free up North Petherton capacity. So we were happy on the last application that having that degree of flexibility enabled it to go where was needed in terms of meeting the need. But I just wanted to be clear what the recommendation was before everyone votes on it.
Well, that was my understanding. Councillor Hendry, just to check, you're happy with that wording?
100%. Yes.
Are you still happy to second with that understanding? And then we'll move on and
Thank
take
you,
the
Madam
vote.
Chairman. I will have to concede to that. Unhappily, I will concede to that.
Thank you. So all in favour, please show. And that is unanimous. So thank you, members. Thank you for the debate, and that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you.